fairy tales, parables, fables. These are stories of the ideal that we tell our children to tell them what ought to be in the world, not necessarily what is. Because when you're forming a child, you want them to know what is right and what is wrong, so that when they are faced with the morally gray, they know how to navigate it by knowing what truth is. At least, that's what fairy tales, parables, and fables used to be. Today, they're a delivery system for a worldview. Let's talk about that as we watch our culture stray further every day. Howdy, Jonathan Fiala for Further Every Day, sitting in the chair of host, also the chair of philosophy today, joined by a full panel. I got CJ on the right. How's it going?
Going very well. Glad to be back with everyone today. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you there in the chair of theology, dealing with why we believe what we believe.
We're going to attack it from a spiritual perspective and see where we go.
Amen. All right. Yours truly sitting in the chair of philosophy, dealing with the rigor the Christian must bring. To my left, I have Miss Nikki. How's it going?
Good morning. It's good. Today's good.
I'm glad to have you there in the chair of culture.
Glad to be here.
To her left, we got the Steve Johnson. How's it going?
And I'm going to amp up the energy today.
So, off screen, I told them, make sure that we have a good energy and kind of a flow tone. I was talking to Charlie.
Politically incorrect today.
But Steve is like full gaslight mode today, which is okay. It's full Steve. He's in the chair of politics, which is perfect for the chair of
Doing
gaslighting.
fairy tales.
And to his left, we got Charlie. How's it going?
I'm here.
In the chair of economics, let's get to it. Okay. In 1937, the world was wowed with a new feat of animation. And this new example of just beauty and just wonderful rendering of a colorful story from Grimm's fairy tales was called Snow White. It captured the minds and hearts of people around the world. Actually, little known fact, the man with the little mustache in Germany who caused all the problems, it was actually one of his favorite movies. So even the hardest and most cynical and evil of hearts actually was warmed by Disney's Snow White. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs really just
Maybe he just liked the raising of the dead or something.
Well, no, I think you can't dehumanize him too much. I think Hitler. You can't say that word on the YouTube without getting in trouble. Apparently, there's a whole list of words we got to watch for. Apparently, even he found it to be heartwarming. So, what you have in Snow White is a set of archetypes. It's a very simple story, and the original is somewhat sanitized here. Not going to get too far off the weeds on that. But, Mr. Producer, if you could pull up the first clip. Yes, you're going to want to do that. Yeah. Go ahead and pull up that first clip, and let's watch a little bit of this. And you're going to see, go ahead and mute it, roll it, and you're going to see the courtship phase between this young lady and a man who comes into her life. She's singing about, do you remember the song, Mr. Producer?
I remember the chorus.
Yeah. So she's singing about being at the wishing well and wishing for
the one I love.
Wishing for the one that I love to find me. So go ahead and skip forward just a little bit, and we're going to see, right, I think it's about halfway mark. Yeah, just go ahead. There you go. Right there. And while she's at the wishing well, who comes along?
Dun, dun, dun.
The prince.
Dun, 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 dun.
And he shows up right behind her as the wishing well echo comes back up to her. We're playing it this way so we don't get in trouble with YouTube's copyrights. We're in trouble enough with YouTube already. But yeah, well, we won't say Charlie's name. But all the magic is gone without the music. Disney is a wonderful thing with music. So you see these two. They meet. Now, a lot of women say that they think that this is bad. Mrs. Pomeroy, do women like to be pursued?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so is what he's doing? Does this look like SA?
No.
Actual assault A?
No.
Well,
no,
and
no,
look at that scene right there. What is she doing? That's not a look of, oh my gosh, I've got to hide. That's a look, I hope he comes.
This is actually...
And I need to change into something.
Miss Nikki.
Well,
Yeah.
you have to look at the...
Appropriate.
1937, This was very appropriate. There was a lot of innocence at that time, and there wasn't the self-actualization and the sexualization that went on. So this was very innocent and very pure in that day and time.
And so, of course, then you have the Wicked Queen. So, Mr. Producer, let's go ahead and go. So I'm doing this to establish the fact, one of the biggest complaints about Snow White from Disney and from the likes of Rachel Zegler, who we're going to talk about. Yeah.
From Disney in today's
culture is that this is somehow the man is inputting on her and he's pursuing her in a way that is morally reprehensible. Mm-hmm. So the scene that's gotten all the ire, you see loads of books written about it and articles online. We'll show a couple. Go ahead, Mr. Producer, pull up that next scene if you would. Is this one. And this is the scene where after she has encountered, no, go ahead and do it with the one you were doing. Yeah. There we go. This is the scene where even in so beautiful, even in death, the dwarves could not find it in their hearts to bury her. And this is true to the original Grimm fairy tale. They fashioned a coffin of glass and gold and kept eternal vigil at her side. So go ahead and fast forward. You're going to see in this scene that the dwarves, okay, the prince who had searched for the maiden far and wide heard of the maiden who slept in the glass coffin. Okay, let's go ahead and skip to the kiss. And you see this man comes in and he's singing a song of mourning. This is the guy who they both fell for each other, right? Wasn't that a natural love story
Yes.
before?
Yes.
But of course, this scene, and you look at what he says, he's mourning that he's never going to see her alive again.
And note who split the barrier there.
Yeah.
Dwarfs.
So also note who were the men in her life who weren't good enough to be her Prince Charming. Each one of them had a piece of the puzzle, and it took the right guy to come in and kiss and then awaken her to something new.
Well, it was true love.
Correct.
True love. True love.
Correct. She loved the dwarves, but in
They were in
a friendly way,
They
a
were in
brotherly
the
way.
friend zone.
They were in the friend zone.
Right.
Well,
Can we
also
go
look
ahead
at them.
and pause that for a moment, Ryan? Because, it just struck me with something here. Nikki saying true love. It's really interesting when you analyze some of the older Disney movies that they follow, they almost shadow a Christian paradigm.
Yes, and that's where we're going. That's the
So-
whole purpose. Why do they hate it? Why do they hate it today?
And when you talk about true love, awakening the princess, to me, the true love of Jesus Christ in the cross and awakening the church.
You're stealing the end here, but yes,
So-
that is the end.
Well,
Podcast is over, everyone. Thank you.
well, I did it again. But
Are we in the wrong chair?
here's, and we're going to get into these details. There's some other interesting points to bring out about why we're going the other way, and not going to get into that.
Hold those thoughts,
Okay.
because I want you to have a stronger foundation. Pull up
That's fine.
the next clip, if you would. Let's pull up Zegler, and then I want to look at a very similar fairy tale, Sleeping Beauty.
I just mean that it's
Yeah, her voice hurts my ears.
Oh,
She's
and while we're pulling that up, I'll wait to make this point because there's something about her that really reeks bad.
Go. You got this, bud.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to
Spoken
be
by Wonder
dreaming
Woman.
about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in. I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once, and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once, and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years. When
This
I
is
was
the
doing this. The
actress
original
for
cartoon
Snow
came out in
White.
1937, and very evidently so.
Modern.
There is a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. So we didn't do that this time. It's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess until 2024. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows?
I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess. I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
Well, you can't even go to Disneyland anymore. Have you ever been to that Snow White ride at Disneyland?
I get stopped for photos every time I'm online for the Snow White ride, and it is I have to pretend like, oh God, well, crazy that we're in front of this.
Wait, how often are you in line for the Snow White ride?
And I was like, God, I hope no one.
That's a good question.
Every time
Hello?
they come up to me, I'm always online for this freaking ride, and they think it's like I'm standing there waiting for the photo op, being like,
Well,
So
you
that's
kind of
enough of her.
are. You
just the weirdest thing, but it always happens
Next
to me,
one.
and I'm always have to just pretend that I don't always spend my time here. I swear to God.
Is that your favorite?
So okay, I've had all I can take of that shrew. But let's look at the three things that we see here, and I want y'all to bounce off of this and get that one ready if you would, Mr. Producer. I see a disdain for traditional gender roles between men and women,
Totally.
and a hatred for men.
By the way, it was backed up by Wonder Woman, who,
I know.
we could go down that path.
I know. It's kind of interesting though. Gal Gadot still doesn't look as ugly as Ziegler. I'm just saying that there's something extra.
Stop it. Stop it.
No. I'm saying there's something extra with Ziegler. There's an extra hatred that's like that's defined there. She has a disdain for history and the desire to remake the world into a woke image.
I would
world.
say she has a disdain for learning history.
I agree. And she has a disdain for everyone who's come before her, including the original Snow White vocal actress, the people who have supported her. So we see three things. And I want to cut to the end a little bit, kind of basically on what you said. Mm-hmm. You're seeing two different worlds. You're seeing one that replicates truth, which happens to line up with the Christian worldview. Yep. Even though the original came at a paganistic worldview, they were focused on truth. So they had at least that aspect of Prince Charming coming, true love's kiss, wakes you up from sleep out of death into life. That rhymes with Jesus.
Correct.
And
Correct.
I know you had something to say. They don't want to go ahead and play Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately what you're seeing in her is also something that's reflected in the greater younger generation and culture of today, right? Which is really a lack of understanding of our past. And what I mean by that is everything seems old. It seems too simple. It's not sleek. It's not elegant. It's not in today. It's not modernized, right? And this is in a lot of different things. It's in church, right? We want the modern church. We don't like the traditional aspect of church. And I think what we fail to see is that, or sometimes we struggle to balance, I should say, is that there should be a balance that we have in progression, right? And staying with the times, but without losing the history. And so I think what you're seeing is the disdain really for how people used to think. And when you have that disdain, you don't take into consideration the context by which they created something or made something, right? Mm-hmm. And I heard a great quote the other day. I was reading a book by John Maxwell, and the quote was, "Indifferent people cannot make a difference in the world." I'm botching the quote a little bit there, but the fact is that when we are not willing to consider others and how they did something, and we ignore that, it leads us to our own worldview, our own point of truth, so to speak, and then we act on that, and usually it's misinformed and misguided.
I think there's a really interesting, thought-provoking question here, not for discussion. If there was any subject that would cause us to make school days longer, what subject would it be? I would submit to you history. There is a lot of history that we are overlooking day by day anymore because we, quote unquote, do not have the time to teach it.
Well, I think that could also be boiled down to we live in the quote fast food mentality, right? We want that information quickly. We want to move
Sure.
to the next thing. It's popcorn, right? I need to put it in the microwave. I need to get it out in the next 60 seconds. So yeah, I think there's this. I mean, she doesn't want to go watch a movie from 1937. Why? Well, because when you're so used to watching movies in 2024, I don't want to go watch Snow White from 1937, not because of anything.
I do. I'd rather watch that one than the one that is.
Well, I won't
Well,
watch.
it
I
is-
won't watch the new one, but I'm just saying, like the old one, because we're so used to how new things are done, it kind of bores us a little bit.
But that goes to our culture today also, is because we are used to fast pace. But when you looked at 1937, people didn't even have television sets in their home. Going to the movies to see Snow White was a really big deal.
That was a big deal.
And they were sitting there and they were absorbed because their mind was not in this fast paced mentality. And I think we get robbed a lot of times of meditation and deep thinking
Absolutely.
because there's so much going on.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of that is translated. It says in the Bible, in the last days, knowledge shall increase. I think the more knowledge you have, the more access to knowledge you have without a guiding principle like the Bible, the more corrupt the mind becomes. So that even a scene like this from Sleeping Beauty, where the prince kisses, where the prince kisses her at the end. By the way, there's a very similar courtship ritual. For the sake of time, I was just texting Mr. Producer, Rai, the producer guy, in this chair as always. Thank you, buddy. We want to go ahead and just skip the courtship phase because it's very similar, where you have the two falling in love, and then all of a sudden, both of those kisses were not without context. But of course, the culture takes that out, revisionist history, to take out that context. Go ahead and play. This is one of the last scenes, not the last scene, but one of the last scenes in Sleeping Beauty. After he has killed the wicked witch who's turned into a dragon. And by the way, Jordan Peterson does an interesting job on this. He talks about how evil could be seen as the witch, the evils of life. And you have to have a prince who comes in and tackles that issue, then storms the castle and saves the day. That's the masculine desire, is to conquer, but to conquer with a good purpose is the duty of a true good man.
This is Cinderella.
I was going to say,
This is not Cinderella. This is
Don't
Sleeping
think
Beauty. This is Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty.
Boy,
Yeah, Sleeping. Yeah, okay.
boy, oh boy.
But of course, this
I was
also.
thinking Snow White, but it's Sleeping Beauty.
Notice how the color changes, the world changes.
Okay, so one takes a bite of an apple and they fall asleep.
That's
one,
Snow White.
One pricks her finger in Sleeping Beauty. Gotcha.
Sleeping Beauty pricks her finger.
Gotcha.
And again, the whole narrative with that is potentially, again, link in the description below if you want to have an interesting listen. Jordan Peterson has some interesting thoughts on it. We don't all necessarily agree 100% on that. But Jordan Peterson's thoughts are, you have the story of a woman who's overprotected, and death itself, they're so focused on protecting her from the world that they shelter her to the exclusion of her ability to be a free will agent. And eventually, she falls into the exact same trap that everyone was worried about in the first place. But it's an interesting story. But instead, we have Maleficent, and we're not going to go into Maleficent. But basically, Maleficent is a story that elevates the devil into that position. And we could pull those clips, but for now, let's pull up one more clip, and then I think it's time to start reacting in total, because I think we need a good cultural gist of it. Frozen. If you could pull up Frozen, Mr. Producer, because that's going to be
We just lost all the viewers on that one. They don't want to hear it.
Charlie, let it go.
This I never saw.
Okay, go ahead and roll it. This is what happens when true love's first kiss is supposed to be brought forward. Don't mute it. We actually want to hear this one. Go ahead and play it. Let's roll.
Anna!
in a modern Disney story.
So cold.
Hans, you have to kiss me.
What?
Now.
Oh,
now.
slow down.
We'll give you two some privacy.
What happened out there?
Elsa struck me with her powers.
You said she'd never hurt you.
I was wrong. Oh,
Anna.
she froze my heart, and only an act of true love can save me.
A true love's kiss.
Meta, but we'll allow it so far.
Wait.
Oh, Anna. If only there was someone out there who loved you.
The true face of men,
Oh.
young ladies.
Oh.
This is how men really
You
are,
said
little
you
girls.
didn't.
As 13th in line in my own kingdom, I didn't stand a chance. I knew I'd have to marry into the throne somewhere.
What are you talking about?
As heir, Elsa was preferable, of course, but no one was getting anywhere with her. But you,
Hans.
you were so desperate for love, you were willing to marry me just like that.
Wanting marriage is bad,
I
kids.
figured after we'd married, I'd have to stage a little accident for Elsa.
Hans. No, stop.
But then she doomed herself, and you were dumb enough to go after her.
Please.
All that's left now is to kill Elsa and bring back Summer.
You're no match for Elsa.
No, you're no match for Elsa. I, on the other hand, am the hero who was going to save Arendelle from destruction.
You won't get away with this.
Oh, I already have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Producer.
So
Okay.
this is a radical 180
From what you see,
from 1937.
and so here comes the question, and we're going to cover this in 2 episodes from now. We're going to talk about what is art, but I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole right now. But art is going to express the truth claims that the artist holds about the world. So what we've seen is a radical shift in our culture's belief system. We see something that is basically marriage is not worth the risk. You see radical feminism in this movie, but also the side that you don't see is the radical meninism, if I will, the men going their own way, the red pill movement. Marriage is not worth it for a man because she can take half of your stuff, and she's like this shrew. She's like Elsa, right? Who's angry and bitter. But here's the problem. You know, we're going to talk about the Barbie movie in a moment. But the biggest problem I have with the Barbie movie is that all of the stereotypes are only in the leftist world. Those women and those men only exist in leftist culture. But we'll talk about that in a moment. But that's my frustration. When we look at the theological side of things, I want to hand this over to you. What is the traditional role for man and woman, and why is it so important? Why is it so important for us to uphold the value of that as Christians?
Yeah, the one thing to bring in just real quickly is, you know, further in that movie, you know, Christoph is the true love, and
Yes,
you know, but there is a, and I guess this is a good parlay into this, right? When we look at creation, and a lot of the truth that we find and need for life, we can start in Genesis. When we look at the creation, God, God created man, right? And from man created woman. And in Ephesians, Paul says, man submits himself to God, woman submits herself to the husband. And the purpose of all this is man, woman in relationship, a godly relationship, right, with the Holy Spirit is a picture. It is a form of the image of God. And what I mean by that is when you look back at Genesis, God says, let us create man in our image. God is talking to somebody. Who's he talking to? He's talking to the Son and the Holy Spirit, right? The Trinity. man, woman, God is a reflection of the image of God. Therefore, the importance of marriage, the importance of man and woman, is because it is the reflection of God himself to his creation. And so the need for us as men to submit ourselves to God and lead our wives in the right way, and for wives to submit themselves to their husbands. And we need to come back to this question of submission to make sure it's clearly understood. But it's for this reason. Men must have the right relationship with their wife to reflect the right image to their children, the right reproduction of that correct image is critical to the church, because the Christian makes up the church. So man leads wife in the right way. They reflect the image of God to the children. The children are reproduced in the ways and admonitions of the Lord. They help grow the church. And then what does Jesus say about all this? He says the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. The culture is a defensive mechanism. The church is an offensive mechanism. And so the importance of understanding this right order
is very important.
Is critical to the success of the church.
Here's where people get hung up on in our culture today. Submission. Submission is a free will act to bring yourself under the protective hand of another. Now, and I should say in the Christian realm, that's what it means biblically. To bring that person, you make a free will choice. A man makes a free will choice to come under God to lead his family. Now, get one thing straight. A woman is not less valuable than a man. And I'm going to show you something that you may not have thought about before. So when a man is following God, a woman makes a free choice to come under her husband. Not under as in you're stupid. What she's doing is she's coming under a second layer of protection. God, man, woman. Not because she's stupid. Not because she has less value. Think of it this way. Her role as a mother and bringing in the next generation has 2 layers of protection. When have you ever heard that before?
Correct.
So that child that she is going to produce through their marriage, that she is going to take care of, there's 2 layers of protection. That shows you the importance of her role and her responsibility. But man has turned it that she is less value, she is stupid, and she has to be like a dog who is told, go sit, roll over, lay down.
That she can't do anything on her own.
That's right. But that's not really what the picture is showing. The picture is showing protection.
And that's the Old Testament picture that a lot of people push against. And they'll say, well, see, look here, the woman can't make decisions without her father. And it's like, what kind of decisions are we talking about? We're talking about marriage specifically. We're saying, dude, if there's a dude who's preying on a woman, saying stuff like, I need you in my life, maybe I'll kill myself if I don't, or, have you, or whatever, there needs to be a barrier between a predator and a young woman. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. There has to be that barrier. And so when you see the biblical example of submission of a daughter to her father, it's not one of ownership. It's one of, you have a 12, 14-year-old girl, and there's a 30-year-old man who wants to prey upon that. The dad is able to say, wait, no. Whatever my daughter says, no. You can't have my daughter. And people who say, well, we should abolish that. Really, you're pushing for a release of God's protection against the P words that live in this world. And that's really what you're looking at, the people who have that kind of a tendency. So it's submission. Jesus submitted to God when he came to this earth. Mm-hmm. When he said in the garden, not my will, but yours. Submission's a beautiful thing. You can't have an army with just an admiral or a general. You got to have majors, and then you got to have sergeants.
Well,
The woman is like the sergeant of the family. She's the one who gets the privates and the corporals and the subs all in order, all the children. She's the one who herds those.
Well,
a general is nothing without a sergeant.
So the one thing to remember in all of this too is that the Bible says man and woman shall become one flesh. Mm-hmm. So there is this unique picture of God saying man submits himself to the Lord, woman submits herself to her husband, but then God saying, wait a second, you're one flesh, right? There is this balance to be had within the family. It's not an order of hierarchy.
Correct.
That's correct.
As much as it is a recognition that on this in this earth, right, we're being shepherded. You know, the father to the daughter, that's not a picture. You're right. It's not a picture of ownership. I was sitting there and I was thinking about it. I was like, that's a picture of a shepherd.
Yes.
The shepherd does not necessarily own the sheep.
Correct.
Right? God
Those
owns.
those sheep are going to be required of the owner. The owner's going to say, "What have you done with the little ones that I entrusted to you?" By the way, that's why. By the way, I think women get it really bad when there's a broken marriage here on this earth or a broken sexual relationship. In heaven or in hell, I think the guy is going to be much worse off. Because that is the man's responsibility. God says, when you do this deed and a child is brought forth, you're when you do the deed, you're responsible to the woman, period. Like, you're responsible for that woman from now on. And if you break that responsibility, God does not look kindly on that. And if you have, that's fine. There's forgiveness, right? There's forgiveness.
Grace, mercy.
And there's grace and mercy. But it's not something to keep doing. Because God's going to look at you one day, men, and say, hey, what did you do with the responsibilities I gave you? Mm-hmm. And so we're not saying that the culture reacting to evil men is bad. But what I do want to focus on is, why is the culture saying that this is not what happens sometimes? This is the rule. Because you look at, by the way, I love Tangled, but Tangled, the guy is not a good guy. He's a 22, 23-year-old canon dealing with an 18-year-old and taking her out of her mother's house. Just let all of that fly. Now it's a bad evil stepmother who's not really actually, she doesn't have authority over the kid. Mr. Producer brings that up, and you're correct. But what do little girls think? Just tuck that away in the back of the mind, because it's just, there's some harmful things that get brought in.
I think here's part of the danger. We're not watching our movies in the right, with the right mindset.
Hop into the chair of economics here. Go ahead.
Go ahead. You know, when we look at these different things, I go back to that word amuse, broken down. Amuse. Meaning not. Muse, think. When we're watching movies like this and we're enjoying them and whatnot, it's amusement. We're not thinking. That is not what you can do when you're watching movies like this. That's like taking a fence down for the fox to get into the hen house. That's what that really is. And we've got to learn how to watch movies. When you take a look at Frozen, everybody's sitting on the edge of their seat. Yes, true love is going to win. And all of a sudden, bang, it was like dropping a bomb off in the middle of the scene.
Yeah.
It radically changed. But you want to know something? How many little girls did we have walking around singing Let It Go all the time?
Yep.
All the time.
Well, and then what is let it go a euphemism for?
And that's exactly right. And you know
don't
what?
Feel, don't let them know, but now they know. Let it go, let it go.
Yes.
Can't hold it back anymore. If that is not a coming out, that is at the very minimum a rebellion to everything, all the values that your parents put in. Now, her parents had terrible values. I'm just going to say that out loud. But when you say this is at what reality is and what it ought to be, this is the understanding that we're telling kids this is what reality is in fairy tales. That's the purpose of them. So I want to open this up to the floor.
I got one more
you
comment on
segued.
that. In the local New Testament church,
Didn't understand that, bud.
Propaganda.
Propaganda is correct.
the local New Testament church is the one that has failed in identifying this kind of stuff and making it known. And we've been taken captive by the lies.
Because
We're not watching with the mindset of saying, how does this line up biblically?
And,
take it deeper. Right? You go back to creation and you look at Satan, the devil, with Eve. The temptation was, wait a second. He said not to eat of this, but you can. And he's afraid that if you eat of this, your eyes will be open. He's afraid that you will have independence. God wants to keep you dependent. Mm-hmm. Is what Satan is what the devil was saying to Eve, and that is the lie that is propagated throughout all of time, even to now.
I was going to say even today.
So I just got to slip this in, and I want you to keep going, and then I'm going to open up to everyone. As I was about to say a moment ago, I want to, from the chair of philosophy, I'm going to open this up to the floor. We'll start with CJ, then everyone else. Why is it so important to break down the familial structure? If we understand from the chair of theology that there's a man and a woman, and the archetype is the man's the provider, he's the hero, he's the one that works. The woman is the one who brings stability. To a dangerous man needs stability, right? A dangerous man, a man who's got courage, he needs someone to support him, or he'll be all alone, and someday he'll crumple. In the godly perspective, the woman is the one who comes up alongside and says, here's your ballast. President John Adams said to his wife, he called her Abigail, he said, you are my ballast. You are the thing that keeps me through the torrent of seas of all the difficult things in my life. You're the one that gives me ballast. Why would the enemy of our souls, CJ, go about destroying that narrative?
Because God created us for relationship with him, first and foremost. But then in the creation of Eve, he created relationship between man and woman. And one thing to note is the Bible does say, look, if you can get through life without being married so that you can stay completely focused 100% on the call, on the will of God, right, with the kingdom of God, that's what you need to do. Most people can't, and God's good with that, right? Because he created by design, he created man for relationship with him. He created woman and man for relationship with each other. The idea is the picture and the image of God for the purpose of reproducing that image in the children who, as Christians, make up the church. The church is the offensive weapon of God upon the earth to destroy the gates of hell for the purpose of eternal redemption.
For everyone.
For everyone. And so this family structure and the importance of the man's role to provide, right? That the Bible talks about a man has to provide for his family. In most cases, we see men reflected in Scripture as the prophets or as the kings or as the fighters, as the warriors. But we do have some instances of the women like Deborah, who also was one of those who God had raised up for a reason. So God is not against women.
He's not against women at all.
At all. But we see this picture in Proverbs 31 of what the virtuous woman looks like. And she works, she toils. The Bible clearly makes mention of how she works and how she toils, how she takes care of her family. I mean, to a degree, in my experience, I feel like I work hard. I feel like I do my absolute best to provide for my family. I feel, honestly, at times the weight and the anxiety that comes with providing for my family. But at the end of the day, my wife, I feel like, has it harder. She has to wake up in the morning and take care of 4 kids, get them through their school. She has to make sure the laundry gets done. She has to make sure that the bills get paid. She makes sure that the food, the kids are fed, that the groceries are stocked, right? Then she has appointments that the kids have to go to and events that the kids have to go to.
You homeschool your kids, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, she's working.
For those who don't know.
Yep. She's working from dawn until we go to bed. I get up and I go to work for 8, 9, maybe 10 hours. Her day never stops. The importance of women on the earth is incredible. And we don't have to have role reversals in order to show the strength of the woman. We need to have a proper understanding of the roles. And when we do that, we can get back to seeing the image of God, reflecting it correctly.
So, if anyone wants to add to that, otherwise we'll just roll right to what the culture has done to that role. Because, pull this up real quick. Mr. Producer's going to pull up a clip. This is from, or not a clip, a slide from Vox on the happiness of women since 1970. And what you've seen is, CJ was just talking about a traditional role for women, okay? And what you see is since the traditionalist role has been destroyed, by the way, men's happiness is always tagged below women until recently. I wonder why. Because what you've seen is as the increase in access to divorce, to sex, has skyrocketed, men's happiness peaked. And by the way, women's happiness was on a slow, steady decline. That's the red line you're seeing. If you're watching on video, on YouTube or Rumble, that's what you're seeing there. And actually in the mid-90s, women's happiness was at an all-time low. And it was, by the way, below men's happiness. By the way, men didn't do that well either. Men's happiness has slowly declined as well because of the depravity of the world. Thank you, Mr. Producer. So we see that the culture has been really, really focused at destroying that, but they've also been going after the femininity of women. And femininity is like a bad thing. And I don't know if you want to say anything on that before we pull up the Jonathan Cahn shot.
I would say the women are going after the masculinity as well.
Correct. They're ditching. So men are, the culture says women be lesser men, men be lesser women. But let's go ahead and pull up.
But for what reason?
Yeah. There's the question.
Jonathan Cahn, pull it up. Pull up the Jonathan Cahn one, if you would, sir. We'll go ahead and roll this. Folks, this will be interesting. Miss Nikki, I want to get your reaction when we're done.
And the Smashed Babies. Could a doll from the 1950s and a Hollywood movie be connected to an ancient Mesopotamian goddess and to the end times? Could there actually be a dark mystery behind Barbie? This is Jonathan Cahn, and it's time for an expose. The biggest movie of the season is about a girl's doll from the end of the 1950s, Barbie. But the fact that Hollywood could take that doll and turn it into an attack on half of the human race, on marriage, on life itself, is a sign of just how sickened our culture has become. I'm going to give you a glimpse of just one scene that's going to give an expose to all the others, and it's going to take it to another dimension. Now, Ben Shapiro did a review of the movie to show how profound the movie is in its dumbness, but I'm going to take it to another realm, that of the spiritual. First, this has to be the most widely distributed anti-man movie ever made. Never before has there been a major motion picture directed at children, girls, to the effect of indoctrinating them against men. Just a few years ago, this motion picture could not even be made as a children's movie. But it shows you how rapidly our culture is changing.
This next part is
or
very
rather,
important to
deteriorating. What kind of movie it actually is going to be revealed in the text from its actual dialogue. I'm going to read it. It comes from the lips of Barbie herself. She says this: "By giving voice to the cognitive dissonance required to be a woman under the patriarchy, you robbed it of its power." Let me say that again. By giving voice to the cognitive dissonance required to be a woman under the patriarchy, you robbed it of its power.
Sounds pagan.
What kind of human communication is that? It's not. It's certainly not normal human communication. It's the kind of sentence you find in a handbook of radical feminism, or a film made by Joseph Stalin's Revolutionary Council, or the Arts for the Propagation of Marxist Doctrine. And that gives you an idea of what we're actually dealing with. Some people would say, well, the movie's just about fun, so why are you treating it so seriously? Well, that's the point. It's not about fun. If it were, you would never have such words and phrases and sentences. That reveals something very serious. When you think of entertainment and children's entertainment, the first two words that come to mind are not cognitive dissonance or the patriarchy. No, those are words that are used in propaganda and brainwashing. And yet it's aimed at your children, particularly at your daughters. And focusing it all on a doll is a brilliant way to propagandize or brainwash children. And because children are impressionable, such things do and will have an effect, as they plant seeds that will impact the future, even of our culture. What about the continual use of the word patriarchy? It's presented as something to be taken as an absolute reality. In this context, it's a buzzword employed in the writings of radical feminism as a specter responsible for all the evils in the world. It's a word used by radical feminists, many of whom hate men, and that it's used over and over again in this movie is no accident, because the movie depicts men as evil or dangerous. At best, they're presented at the beginning just as jerks, useless, inferior creatures with no real purpose. And then, after experiencing the, quote, real world, the men, the evil creatures that they are, begin to take over Barbie land. The men brainwash the women into submission, into being wives, as in marriage, which radical feminism views as something to be destroyed, or agreeable girlfriends, another evil. Why? Because men are evil. That's what men do. Men must be defeated.
So, by the way, it's just a teaser. It's 26 minutes of Jonathan Cahn. By the way, we can't play all of that because that would be stealing Jonathan Cahn's content. Go over and check him out. Link in the description below.
That is an interesting, to say the least.
And it goes further.
Clip.
It goes further. Miss Nikki, what were some of the huge takeaways for you so people know why we're playing that clip? It's more than just what he said in the first couple of minutes there. But there's a lot of symbolism in Barbie, isn't there?
Yes, I think we, in the culture from days before, years ago, it was women were hindered from a higher education, okay? And women had desire to be educated. And I think that's a good thing. I think education is a good thing. Women had desire to maybe do something outside of the home. It doesn't mean, I don't have children at home and I have a job and I really like my job. There's a place for that. So, but we've gone to the point now where we have focused so much on that we are being kept back. The men are hindering us, that now we've come to the attitude of we don't need men. Well, that's not true. I want you to think about something. When America was being settled, it was the men that came over. When they were ready to civilize the area, they brought the women in because they knew a place run by men only would not become a civilized area. But when you brought the women in, that's what brought the calm into the area. You take men out of the picture. I'm sorry, women, you're not going to run the world because you can't go to war and fight against men the way men fight against men. I'm just sorry. I know we have tanks and we have all that stuff, but it's not going to happen. And the reason that's not going to happen is because you can be a woman who wants to become a transgender. You're not going to make it on the NFL football team. Just not going to happen because you just, there's a physical difference between us. And when a man and a woman come together, they complement each other in different ways and make a strong unit. Never strong without the other.
So you need both sexes for society. There's a thing that the red pill movement will say, and I'm going to flip it on its head. I'm going to 180 it, and you guys will appreciate. You'll understand what the red pill says by the time I'm done. If you have 100, women and one man. I'll go with the standard. If you have 100 women and one man, or 10 men, we'll go with 10 men on an island, you leave them for 100 years, you'll come back to a thriving society. If you have 100 women and 10 trans men on an island, you'll come back in 100 years and find 110
Dead people.
Dead people. Right? So what you need both.
You do.
You need both.
Society is balanced between a man and a woman. It's
And
not going
why?
to change
And why?
By design.
by design.
Because it's original design. And what has the culture tried to do since Adam and Eve, right? The culture has tried to find independence apart from God because we see submission to God as us losing our ability to make our own decisions. But yet what we don't realize is when we submit ourselves to God, we have freedom in the spirit, that we can live in the power and with the abundant life that God has designed for us. But instead we want to take it to ourselves. And, I put this here that independence from God will not save you. It will only enslave you. And that is from, you look at Adam and Eve, right? They disobeyed God, and what happened? They were enslaved to the consequences that were put upon them from separation from God. Jonah wanted independence from God's will. What did he find himself in? Enslaved in the belly of a whale, right? David, he wanted independence from God. He wanted to show how powerful he was apart from God. And what happened? He lost his next son, right?
He lost his family after that.
Right? He was enslaved to the consequences that came. And we have this mindset because Satan is out there always propagating this lie that you can be independent from God. You do not need him. Mm-hmm. And so I think when we look at this, it really, you have to go deeper beyond and say, what is this?
Mr. Politics?
Yeah, so yeah, go ahead. Because I was actually going to open it up to politics.
Because everything we've been talking about really falls back to this.
Yeah, because you've been real quiet there. I want you to react to that.
Yeah, and one of the things I've really been kind of seeing on this is that in regards to a lot of these shows, you have a lot of the people that go to see these, let's say parents that are letting their kids go that aren't, say, Christians, or those that aren't strong in their faith, or those that don't study a lot on Christian faith, say like a lot like we do here, and understand a lot on what's going on. And when we see a movie like this, we'll look at it and go, we can see this and we can see this because we're well studied in the Word and we understand what's happening. There's a lot of people that show up on, say, a Sunday or once a month, and they're not well versed in the Word. And they send their kids to these movies and they go, it's just a movie.
It's just a movie.
It's just a kid's movie. Kids don't understand. They're just watching a kid's movie. It's just a Disney movie, or we're going to Disneyland. It's no big deal,
There's a trust in
and
Disney.
They don't understand
That's
the
it.
underlying meanings that are there.
Yeah.
The brainwashing that's going on, and then they don't understand when their little girl is singing the song, and they're going, "Where did you get that song? What are you talking about? Do you understand what that says? Oh yeah, well that's saying this and this," and they're going, "How do you know that?" Well, in school, my teacher told us that blah 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 blah, and it means this and that, and that's the way we're supposed to be.
So,
But I live under grace.
yeah, I've heard that so many times. But should I sin more? That grace aboundeth more.
But you got your teacher in elementary school teaching them what these Disney movies mean, and not teaching them history.
And so that's
not
where
teaching them what they should learn: math, how to read, how to write. They're teaching them what the Disney movie means.
If I may, one of the things that my dad did, and I really resented it at the time, and there's a way he could have done it that I wouldn't have resented it, is he would pause the movie. It would take us 6 hours to get through a movie.
Oh, wow.
Dad, you could have waited until the movie was over before commenting on it. Okay, that aside. One of the things that he did was he went and deconstructed everything that was happening and said, okay, so they made this decision. Why is that important? Why was that right or why was that wrong? If you're going to use movies, if you're going to have them in your house, use them as a source of saying, okay, well, okay, so here's a common one, because my dad was actually a hostage terrorist negotiator for Continental Airlines when he worked for them. And so, always the sign, with the gun to the girl's heads, like, if you do whatever, I'm going to kill. My dad would say, okay, so what you do is, if you're not a good enough shot, which you should be, if you're going to carry a gun, you better be able to hit the tee box. But if you can't hit the tee box, you say, okay, you got 2 chances to die and 1 to live. Chance number 1, you shoot her, I shoot you. You're done. Chance 2, I get tired of this conversation and I put one between your eyes anyway, because I can see you. Or you can say, I'm releasing her and it's done. Because as far as, you're concerned, that this person is gone. This person, by the status and calculation, when they're in that position, statistically, they're dead. So you hit them with the hardball truth of, you've got 2 options to live, or just to die and 1 to live.
Set them free?
And the truth can set them free, right? No, so you just tell them the truth. You say, look, if I get tired of this and I just decide to pull the trigger on you, I can hit you and risk the chance of a muscle spasm, pulling your trigger, or you shoot her and then I just shoot you anyway out of spite. So or you could just drop the gun, and those are your options. So my dad would go through every movie scenario, and unfortunately he would do that in every single freaking movie, but I never forgot it. But also we talked about whenever someone would start to pursue a woman, and he would get lucky and they would have sex. My dad would talk to me about that and say, what's really sad is he's never going to be able to trust her, because he was able to get her in bed before, and she's never going to be able to trust him because he pursued her in a way that was not fitting for a man. He's not a good man when they first hooked up. And so she's always going to say, there's a secretary or there's someone in his life. Mm-hmm. Is he doing the same thing that he did with me? Because I don't trust him, because I know him. And so my dad would break those things down. And for the most part, he did a really good job. There were times where he was wrong, but it's human. You always go back and you nitpick your dad. But
no, I don't do that at all.
But the thing
but that's what you should do with your kids.
He taught you a principle.
Mm-hmm.
And that principle was critical.
Principle-based thinking.
He really did teach how to think.
And that's so critical. I think one of the things that we need to do with our kids, to Steve's point, is we need to deconstruct these movies, and we need to be thinking critically with our kids and asking questions critically and saying, what are the assumptive truth claims? Mr. Producer and I were talking about this. There's a pastor or teacher rather, who was talking about assumptive truth claims. And, I really latched onto that with Ryan, and Ryan's like, well, why is that so important? I said, well, assumptive truth claims are the most dangerous thing, because you assume. Mm-hmm. CJ, when did you stop beating your wife? There's an assumptive truth claim in that, isn't there?
That is a powerful one.
How old were you when you stopped doing that?
Right. So the assumption is that CJ is somehow a bad person, and that he's been doing horrible things to his wife. And then the question that's posed is, when did you stop being a horrible person, or are you still a horrible person? Right. So he has a very good relationship with his wife.
He's nervous now.
His face was like,
what did 3 million views? We've got a wife beater on the podcast.
Yeah, if my son remembers correctly, I used to tell my boys that if you ever are abusive to your wife, you don't have to worry about her father. You have to worry about me.
Yeah, Miss Nikki will come for you. So I think that's important, but
in order to properly deconstruct what we see in the world requires us to first have the proper spiritual worldview on specific things, and primarily everything that we really, the more I study this, the more I feel like everything we need to properly evaluate what is happening in the world and happening in our life, we can find a principle or image in Genesis.
Indeed.
And when it comes to the role of man, the role of woman, there is a balance there that we see in Genesis that doesn't tend to be remembered by a lot of Christians in today's society.
Yeah.
And so when we say, well, how is it that the world is able to produce these movies and put this stuff out there, propaganda, right? When you hear words like cognitive dissonance.
There's no 5-year-old, there's no 10-year-old that even comes remotely close to understanding that phrase and will not for another 10 years.
My 14-year-old won't understand that phrase.
Some 10-year-olds, but I'm with
No,
you. I'm with you.
no.
It's not created for children. It's created for children. And what I mean by that is it's clearly pushing an agenda.
Absolutely.
It's getting these words in these kids' heads.
12,
and
15-year-olds that are going to watch it.
Yeah.
And the thing is that parents need to pay more attention to these movies and sit down and watch them with their kids if that's what's happening, and then go, okay, maybe this is not the best movie for my kids to be watching.
But
That should have been a flag.
But the thing about it is why we're so surprised on the political laws that are being laid out. Abortion up into the moment of delivery. Abortion even now after so many hours after delivery.
Right.
Why we're looking at these people going, what are you thinking? And then we're looking at a movie that, this has been brought. Or even in California now, you have to have a woman on your board of directors.
Yeah.
That's a law now.
By law.
By law. So these are not just movies. These are propaganda tools that, remember, Satan has time.
Yes.
And he is taken time.
We're really close to the end of our time here, and I want to loop this in because I do want to get the politics chair questions in, and I just want to get Steve, because Steve's been real quiet this show, and I want to make sure that
he came with a lot of energy.
He came with all the energy, so I want to give him a chance, that outlet for that, because that's very correct. And what you see is this culture of destroying when we destroy the foundation of the family. And when we're breaking that down, and we're seeing women's happiness tank. By the way, men's happiness tanked too. It just peaked for a while, and then it's going down slowly. We see that we've lost our culture war, and in politics, we've seen this whole affirmative action issue that Miss Nikki was going to, and that's a great segue. With the issue of affirmative action, we see that there's a push for women to abandon careers. And I don't want you to speak to the politics of this. I want you to speak more to the cultural and spiritual aspect of this, because we see women being pushed to have careers, and then when they're in their 40s, they can't have kids. We see women being pushed to be like men, and we have record female unhappiness. We're seeing that women are also, how are they viewed in these high-paying jobs? There's almost always the air over them. Is this an affirmative action hire, or did she actually earn her place? How did she get there? Was she actually a worker? So what do you think Satan's trying to do when the enemy of our souls, ultimately, there's a spiritual aspect to this. And Jonathan Kahn, you go further, you look at the Barbie movie, there's actually some really interesting alignment with Asherah and some of the other gods of the ancient world. So this is a spiritual warfare, and we see it playing out in politics. But what do you think Satan's trying to do by reprioritizing where women are?
Well,
in the workplace versus the home.
The way I see it is he's trying to push women out of the home to basically stop having children, aborting them, and basically just kind of not having them anymore. If you really look, especially if you look at the amount of children that are being born in this country, has really dropped dramatically.
Yes.
Amongst all types of people, whatever group that you're in, have all dropped. And I don't know about those that are coming across.
Yeah, but
I'm not going to get into that.
That's a different rabbit hole.
That's a whole different thing. But
It's greater than the replacement of
correct.
child being born.
Correct.
Throwing
But
Yeah.
those that are
Intentionally
in
so,
this country already, well, just go there. It's all dropped, and you see this affirmative action push in all spheres of the country, whether it be work and whether it be school or whatever it is. And it's a push in everything except for white males.
Yep. And
Okay, and
unfortunately,
that's
the majority. And that's the majority of men in America, specifically,
right,
is white males. So what you see is this antagonism towards the traditionalist family. And by the way, black and brown males, they're coming for you next.
Oh, no. They've already gotten there.
And they're really
they've already gotten
hard on them.
I agree.
Now,
you got to cut you have to cut your member off as a black man, and then you'll be the highest tier. But you got to start with that. Matt Walsh had a nice hierarchy of victimhood. You got to be a trans, disabled man to woman with a few other things, and you'll be the height of hierarchy.
And with the Asherah concept is that all of the males around her were all feminized.
They were all eunuched.
Yes.
And then
what are you seeing in today's culture? The same sort of thing that's going on right now.
Spiritual warfare.
It is. And it's exactly related to this pagan god, Asherah, the same kind of concepts. And if you look into it all, it is the same thing that is going on, and Satan is moving in, and he is working his way for his return to make this one world government happen and to come in to people's lives and affect people, whether it be their family, whether it be work, whether it be their gender or however people want to call it. Their thee, thems, theys, thous, he's, hers, hims, whatever they want to be called. But either way, it's all about the pagan gods.
It's almost like Satan promises you ice cream, and instead you get rotten eggs every time. I mean, it's a constant thing.
That's the thing about the devil with Eve. He said, look, you eat. This is what
you'll
get.
know. But what she got was not really what she thought she was going to get.
Exactly. And the thing is, he had already experienced
that exact thing.
Eve and Adam were going to experience. And so it's just this lie.
Move it over to Mr. Charlie. We've already kind of talked about the economics a little bit, but just put a brief cap on that because we got to wrap.
Well, two things I want to bring up here. One, very quickly, if you want a modern day example of what a get rid of the females is doing, or get rid of children, period, look no further than China.
Yeah.
So that's one. Two.
50 million men.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Let me rephrase that. 50 million woman deficit.
Yep. The thing that we need to do, especially as Christians, am I going to be upset that you took your children to see a movie like Barbie? No, as long as you break that movie down and look at it appropriately.
Yeah.
We have got to get out of this amusement thing. We've got to look at things and not sit there and go, I'm just not going to think about this. Look, if you want to do that, watch a sports program.
Yeah.
If you want to really be amused, do something like that.
Don't even. They've gotten so woke that unfortunately they're just lost.
Yeah. I think Christians need to watch these kind of movies in an appropriate way with a proper biblical background. And if you're not going to look at it from a proper biblical background, at the very least, you ought to look at it from a critical perspective. What is the purpose for this? What is the purpose for that? Why did we get to the edge in Frozen where that kiss was about to be made? Why did that stop?
Propaganda.
Yeah. So I think for me, that's one of the biggest takeaways from something like this. And it's really sad that we're not thinking this way. Christians are not thinking this way.
So with that said, we're going to go ahead and you guys are going to hear a lot more from this. And we're going to do our final thoughts because this is a 3-part episode on art, the culture, etc. You're going to hear more of our final thoughts in the next couple of episodes.
Can I put a plug in from one of our other podcasts?
In just a moment. We're going to be doing next week the anti-hero.
Yes.
And why the anti-hero is become so interesting to our culture and what it used to be versus what it is now. Looking forward to having you guys on.
What's an anti-hero?
Plug the next podcast.
Well, not the next one, but one of our previous ones. We did one on this issue of happiness, and it was very thought-provoking. And I would encourage everybody to go back and find that and give that a listen.
Absolutely. And the issue with that is the pursuit of happiness, does that end in death?
Really good question.
Think
Wow.
about that.
Wow.
So, with that said, if you like this podcast, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We are out of time for today, but we want to say we love you. If you hated this episode, dislike that button twice. It's a multiple of 2, at least. It works better that way. It's more efficient. Thank you. We love you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.